All right, everyone, we're back. We're on with Joe Kirgues, founder of Generator, and he's here to talk about unemployment assistance. Again, same thing as Eddie. Please drop any questions you have in chat, in the Q&A. If the chat is turned off, maybe if they're super pertinent, we'll pop them up during the presentation. Otherwise, we'll get to those at the end. But Joe, if you could do a quick intro on yourself as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is Joe Kirgues. I co-founded Generator, so I have the pleasure and privilege of working every day with Meg and Sway and Brian. One of the things we've been really focused on through this program, and one of the driving goals with the Musician Emergency Response Program, was to do everything we can to take the information that we had been sharing to the benefit of small businesses and startups and make them available in a way that's merchandised and presented exclusively for musicians and artists. We're not, I'm not a day-to-day unemployment expert. In fact, I have been trying to do as much as I can to learn it in advance of this presentation. But what we'll say is we have been researching this across the space, and we think this is an incredible opportunity for musicians to take advantage of a once in my lifetime, and I think hopefully very much longer, opportunity to get as much income as possible so that you can make it through this crisis with enough money in your bank account to pay rent, get food, and do the things necessary to get through it. So with that, thank you for coming. I know this is incredibly dry, so we're going to do our best to do two parts of the presentation. The first part, we're going to give you our take on this, which is narrative and a little editorial, but hopefully gets across the urgency of just what's available, how important it is for you to consider whether this is a good fit for you, and how to make it as accessible for you as possible. And also to let you know if you're having trouble and you're confused or any sort of issues, we'll just let us know and we'll do our best to try to help you. And so our big message is, please watch this with your own self-interest top of mind. And if we can be helpful, please pull the thread. Just let our team know. But thank you for coming. I hope we get to work with you again in the usual capacity of going through our backline or Motown accelerators. But I hope you all find this as an interim effort by us to try to help as much as we can. So the contents of this presentation, the first part, our editorial, our take, just the background of what we're thinking and why we wanted to make this presentation specifically available to you, especially as we've been doing things as varied from mental health and wellness to Instagram music to the general manager of Motown. Why do a dry presentation on unemployment? And we'll hope to make the case that this is very much worth your time. The second part of the presentation, I'm going to give the technical, boring, detailed stuffs of the law. So I'm going to try to give something that's surface level and accessible. And then in the second part, try to give more of the precise parts of the law, so that we're not just talking at vague generalities, but sharing more of the specifics about what's going on. Our big take is, please, if you haven't already and you think it might be relevant, please consider applying for the new unemployment law. This is a once-in-a-generation law that is completely different from how unemployment functioned before. The way to think of this is, under previous scenarios, unemployment was not available to musicians. This in and of itself, making it available to many musicians is a sea change from the status quo. The second part is, not only did they make this available in a way that was historically never possible before, for the first time you're eligible. Not only are you eligible, but you're eligible for a benefit that in sometimes is 3 to 4 times greater than any previous amount of cash benefit from unemployment law generally. So we've got two big sea changes that I think get confusing. And I want to distinguish, option or element A from element B. Element A, you're eligible. That's fantastic news. Element B, you're eligible for 3 to 4 times the usual cash amount. That's extremely good news. So between those two, this is so compelling. We hope you take a full look at it and consider applying for the unemployment law. One way to think of this program, and I don't think it's been presented this way, but it's clearly functioning, at least in some respects, as universal basic income. So it appears that under the CARES Act, which was the stimulus bill that Congress passed and President Trump signed a few weeks back, that they created the law, created a function very much like a universal basic income, at least through June. So if you're looking for a way to survive and get access to the resources you need for day-to-day expenses, this is an unbelievable opportunity to take advantage of an unprecedented program, potentially at least since the New Deal in the 1930s. So just to highlight the historical element of how important this is for everybody. And then the third is how much universal basic income. It's relatively good. So it looks to by our math that you're looking at a minimum of $28,000 a year salary, or the equivalent of about $3,000 a month, or $2,400 a month in additional compensation, potentially up to $3,000 or more. So it's a very good package. The dynamic on this is basically under the new unemployment law, Congress passed a rule that says if you participate on unemployment during this pandemic, and if you meet the rules to participate, which we can talk more about, you get an extra $600 a week. That's just the additional part of the law. What they're still determining is how much of the base level of the law, how much of the original unemployment you would be eligible for, which means at a minimum you're getting $600 a week, but you're probably getting more like $700, $800, maybe even $900 a week under the law. The way this backs out, this means that you're signing up under the new unemployment law for a salary of essentially $2,400 to $3,000 a month. To put it another way, through June, the government is offering you a job at $28,800 to almost potentially $36,000 a year to be on unemployment. So this is an unbelievable change relative to what was previously a program for maybe $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 a year, and that more often than not was not available to musicians. So I can't say enough. This isn't going to last forever. That you got to make sure you comply with the law's requirements, and we'll talk more about it. But this is such a huge project and such an unbelievable chance to take advantage of federal relief that I think the appropriate question is not, why should I apply for unemployment compensation? I think the appropriate conversation you should each have is, why shouldn't I apply for unemployment compensation if I'm eligible? So I think hopefully I'm driving home with our first few slides just how critically important it is for everyone to consider potentially participating in this program. I hope I've said it enough. Please consider applying for this program. So the way we're thinking about this in terms of the narrative, musicians are now, or soon will be, and we'll talk about what's going on that's delaying the implementation of this program, but it's a matter of days, if not weeks, are going to be eligible for unemployment under the law. This isn't everyone. It's not, there's rules and requirements. I'm simplifying very high level objects here, but the default assumption is you're probably in the program if you think you're eligible. But again, I want to caveat that with make sure you're eligible. Again, the fact that you're eligible for unemployment right now is a big deal because under the previous rules, more often than not, musicians were not eligible as musicians. The rules are so substantially expanded that for independent contractors and freelancers, a lot of that sole proprietor element of our economy couldn't take advantage of it, and that encompassed so many musicians. Now for the first time they can. But again, this gets better. Not only are you eligible for the program, you're eligible for the additional $600 a week that they're offering to everybody in unemployment. So just read that again. You're eligible for the additional $600 a week. So let's say under the old rules, you were not eligible for the $200 a week program. Under the new rules, not only are you eligible for what could be a $200 a week program, you're also eligible for this $600 a week package. But this is all a huge mess, and I want to talk now about what's causing some of the confusion in the law. When Congress passed the law, they created 3 programs, and we'll talk about each of them. Essentially, one program took the existing pool and created an additional $600 a week benefit. That did not immediately benefit the musicians and independent contractors and freelancers. The second part of the law, called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, created eligibility for independent contractors and freelancers and sole proprietors under the law. It also incorporated the $600 a week benefit on top for the traditional unemployed. So this Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Act was really the one that, although it didn't create the $600 a week package, it not only created eligibility for unemployment for musicians and artists, but it also clearly stated that they too would be eligible for this unemployment package. The problem is states traditionally didn't work with sole proprietors and independent contractors of this sort and freelancers for purposes of unemployment. And so as a result, they're not immediately prepared to process or even frankly understand without help and support from the federal government what steps are necessary in order to make people eligible to apply. One of the big things that's been delaying the states, and I'll showcase this from the head of Minnesota's Department of Economic Development, is they need to create processes to determine what base level of unemployment musicians and freelancers would be eligible for. So essentially, they have to go into a back room and figure out, okay, well, how do we figure out what your income has been? What's our way of, if you're not getting paid a traditional salary or you've been taking draws on your own, how do we work with you when we've never done anything like that before to figure out what you were earning? And then how do we translate that within our own processes to figure out what your base level of unemployment would be under our system? So this is a very state-by-state model. I know a lot of the artists on today are from Wisconsin and Michigan. I picked Wisconsin. If anybody has Michigan-based feedback, frankly, their website wasn't as updated when I checked it. And so I think Wisconsin's will be the most informative anyway, although it's so state-specific relative to how they've historically implemented their unemployment compensation that part of what we're waiting for is how they're going to answer this question on a state-by-state basis. None of that confuses the main point. Whether you're eligible for $100 under the old law a week or $200 a week or $300 a week, which is probably the relevant range for the vast majority of applicants, you will nevertheless be eligible for the $600 a week package. So I'll restate that again. No matter how the states decide to implement their state-specific side of the program, that will not interfere with the $600 a week pandemic unemployment benefit. So at a minimum, you're looking at a $2,400 a month unemployment package, but you're almost certainly going to be somewhere higher than that, like $2,800 and maybe $3,000 a month, maybe even $3,200, $3,300 a month, depending on how your state interprets the law and your specific application for those benefits. But none of that disturbs the original point. The new benefits are so much larger than the old benefits that they will, in whatever scenario, constitute the lion's share of your unemployment benefit and upside. So you can expect that the numbers we're giving you will be a minimum on that $600 a week, and the news probably only gets better from there. It's just how much better is causing these states to be delayed. This is one of the reasons they're delayed. There's many others. So essentially, the federal government passed a law, but the states need to figure out how to interpret that law in really specific contexts and questions. And the feds write the federal government sends the states what's called guidances, which are little 1 to 2 page memos that answer critical questions that they're hearing or that they anticipate hearing about how the law will be implemented. And while the law was passed on March 25th, those guidances from in this case, the Department of Labor, have been coming to the states a little helter-skelter. So they've been coming, but it takes a couple of weeks and they learn more and they send other ones. All of that combined with the need to create their own state-based processes is slowing down the state's implementation of the law. And one of the things we've heard from people as recently, I talked to Sway as recently as yesterday, was that many of the participants in the backline and Motown emergency response programs have engaged their unemployment offices because they heard about this in the news. And they've either been denied or are being told to come back later. And I think the unemployment offices are so swamped, they're not being very precise in explaining to all of you what's going on with you're denied or we're not answering the phone. And a lot of what's going on is they're trying to get you answers and they don't have enough information and they don't have enough of their own processes in place to get those answers out to you. But it's a matter of days, maybe a week before they can do that. And if you've been frustrated in the process so far, that matches everyone else's experience and isn't something for too much alarm. The good news is this program is coming and it should be coming in the next week. But if your experience is it hasn't come yet, that's everyone else's too. I'm going to take a break and try to answer some questions. Maybe somebody can read them to me because I don't think I can. It's not clicking for me. Maybe if Brian can read me the questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
Cool. So first one says, are you only able to apply for unemployment as a musician if you make a certain amount through your music?
No. So, you're going to have to answer questions, but there's nothing that I've read that indicates a bottom threshold. So if you've been performing and working and I'll share more, there's a fact sheet that maybe Troy, if you can grab the state of Wisconsin's fact sheet and put it in the Q&A. There's a fact sheet that I should have on here, and I'll try to pull it up after, but that tells you what's necessary for a requirement to be eligible, but that base level is not one of the factors for eligibility. It could be a factor in determining how much you get. But again, you'll be getting that on top of the $600 a week number. So maybe you won't get as much, but you'll still get that base $600 a week. I don't know if Troy, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, this for the $600 a week, that is definitely clear. So that'd be on top of whatever you qualify for otherwise. But frankly, that's the biggest chunk for most individuals. So that's the important factor here. And I'll look up that fact sheet for Wisconsin as well.
Cool. Another good question. This says we are a cover band paid primarily in cash. We've lost several gigs since we're a wedding band, etc. The challenge is that I never really filed that cash. Is this just a loss for me at this point? Can I still apply? It sounds like based on the last question, that's a yes.
Yeah, again, we're going into, there's IRS issues and tax issues here that I don't want to step into, but I think that it's safe to say they should certainly go through the process of applying, and that this is, as open, as good as the rules are ever going to get for someone in that scenario to get into the program are as good as they are right now. This is, if you're in that exact scenario, I would be very, make sure you're meeting all the disclosure requirements that, for example, match what you've told the IRS. But, assuming you're giving the full information on your eligibility, I think you should still apply. And without knowing more about your specifics, I'm optimistic you'll still get it.
Cool. Is this only going on during this pandemic or just a law being passed in general?
That's a complicated question, and this gets confusing quickly. The key $600 a week benefit is going on through the end of June. The Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, I believe, is going on through the end of the year, and that'll be in this writing. These programs are overlapping. So what the $600 a week is what's called the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation Program. That's through the end of June. The Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Act itself extends further, so you'll still be eligible for unemployment, is my understanding, but you may not be eligible for that $600 a week program. What this looks like into 2021 is not anything determined by the CARES Act, by the recent changes. So that's still speculative.
Got it. Thanks. This is a bit of a longer one, so hang with me, everyone. This says, I already applied for unemployment and got a letter back saying that I'm not eligible, and that I did not meet the monetary requirements to establish a claim. However, I did submit my application was ready, quote unquote, since I was told to apply right away. Found down from the letter and going to the website. Is there anyone out there that I can talk to help navigate this? Sounds like
Yeah, this is so we want to hesitate about we're not experiencing what you experienced, and we're trying to project and assume facts that we'd have to talk to you individually to learn. But I'll go to my next slide. Is that the last question? If not, let me hold that one and I'll go to the next one. Is there one more question, Brian, or is that it?
no, that's it.
Okay. This was a tweet. I'm on Twitter and I follow economic development people, so you can tell how exciting I am. And the head of Minnesota's equivalent of their unemployment office, or their Department of Economic Deed is what they're called there, did a tweet storm explaining what's going on with Minnesota. And again, this was the best I could find for Wisconsin and Michigan. There's not everything parallel, but this is still, I think, really informative on the question about what's been going on if people tried to apply already but haven't gotten through. So in this tweet storm, he states, last week, we became the first state in the nation to implement the $600 a week federal top-off. So what he's referring to is not the program for musicians and freelancers. He's referring to the extra $600 a week program. Next step, he says, is to expand this to cover the self-employed, which would be the program we're referring to for many musicians. I want to share what that entails, as we're getting lots of good questions here. So he's talking about what we're talking about. And this is pretty recent, 2-3 days ago. So this is pretty fresh information. He says the program that allows for UI for self-employed is called the Pandemic Unemployment Insurance Program, or PUA. It's brand new and has its own eligibility rules and guidance from the feds. It was created on March 27th with the CARES Act, as we talked about, and nothing like it ever existed. So he's giving you a lot of what we talked about, but it's his version of saying, give me a little patience, this is hard. It's modeled after the disaster unemployment, which is a program that the feds used for places affected by things like hurricanes. Which is typically a localized program, and he talks about hurricanes and floods. Scaling that up across the country is what's causing them so much trouble. So they're working really hard to help you, but it's all in the background, and you have to speak economic development to understand what's going on. Basically, this program is administered by the states, and it's not the same as what they had been doing before. So they have to learn a whole new language. So imagine they had been speaking language A, and now they're speaking language B, and it's taking them a while to get it right. There are different eligibility rules and fraud protection measures. They have to be vigilant against fraud. So they're creating what I refer to as that guidance. They're trying to learn how to implement the law, and they're not quite sure yet. And given the differences between the programs, they have to even use their own technology. They can't use their old workflows. So when people are applying and they're being denied, a lot of this is because they don't even have the technology or the workflow to tell you why you were denied. They're just telling you were denied for the old reason because they haven't updated their processes to think there was a new reason. Their teams are working long and hard. They're building automated processes to speed up what he says is income verification. So one of the questions we got was, well, I've been taking my money in cash. How does that apply? And the answer is they're not sure either. They're trying to figure it out. And the law isn't clear on the question you asked. So we're in this gray area. No state has begun except paying these benefits yet. So as recently as 2 to 3 days ago, DEED is saying no one else is doing this. But we're ahead of them because we're collecting the information to determine if you're eligible. And that's like, what are you talking about? You're collecting the information. About half the states aren't even letting people who are self-employed apply yet. And what's going on is this is moving so fast that your state is working on it, but they might not be taking the time to tell you where they are in the process. So what I think is so impressive about Minnesota, but is applicable to Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan as well, is they're working on this, but they don't even know how to tell you where they're at because so much of what they're doing is so new to them. And he closes by saying, we're moving as fast as we can. And the guidance is this. So this is the guy going on Twitter to tell people, and 30 people liked it. So maybe 1,000 people saw this. So this tells you how, even if you're communicating, how hard it is to let the people in need of this know. If you're self-employed, apply now. And this is the part that I read it and I thought was frustrating, but it goes to the last question about, well, I was denied. Even though you'll be denied in the system, we'll flag your account and proactively reach back out once PUA is built and ready to administer. They're very good about what they're doing in Minnesota. I haven't heard any other state say that. So I don't know what happens if you applied and you're denied, if they're planning on reaching out again. But I would say I would anticipate applying again or doing everything you can to apply again. One thing that he says is important to know is that everyone eligible for PUA will be paid everything they deserve, backdated to your eligibility date and the passage of the CARES Act. So what he's saying is, if it takes you longer to get applied, they will still pay you back the $600 a week you would have been eligible for if they processed it when the law said you were eligible. Point being, I don't know when the law says each of you on this webinar will be eligible, but if anything, you may get an initial check that's bigger because it's catching you up on the delays for how long it took to implement the law. I was pretty nervous about putting a tweet storm into a PowerPoint deck, but I think so much of what's going on in public is confusion about a bureaucratic process that hasn't really been transparent. And as a result, people are speculating and rumors are coming about what's going on. And in truth, they're being the state's unemployment offices, trying to do their best to both process the huge unemployment claims from all the existing people and build processes to accommodate the applications for people who aren't eligible yet. And then accommodate that deluge of potential would be applicants. And they're just not even taking the time to communicate like they should. I'd try to be patient with them as much as you can, but I'd also do everything you can to advocate for yourself that everything you can do to get in this funnel and apply, you should do. I've been checking, in anticipation of this presentation, I've been checking the state of Wisconsin's website for information, and it's changed even since the presentation I put together 2 days ago. So I just checked it on a whim before this call, and they had changed it in the last 12 hours, I think, or even it's on here, last updated. So I was on here sometime around that tweet storm. So the pandemic unemployment assistance, they've updated it, and it says, and this is all new. So last time I checked it, they just said, we'll check back and we'll tell you when we know more. The new website, as of a day, what is this, 17th, 2 days ago, is Wisconsin plans to start taking PUA applications the week of April 21st, 2020. PUA overview, and this is where you're seeing all these acronyms: CARES Act, FPUC, PUA, PEUC. We'll talk about all of them, but presume for purposes of everyone on this call, the one you're really tracking is this PUA. Is a new temporary federal program that provides up to 39 weeks of unemployment benefits to individuals who are not eligible for regular UI, such as individuals who are self-employed, independent contractors, limited recent work history. So that goes to a lot of your questions on pay, and other workers not covered by regular UI. So this is sort of the catch-all. One thing that I was looking for more, that they just released guidance around, that I haven't yet processed, but I thought put in stack, is the payment amount. They're looking at a minimum on top of the 600. It looks like you're going to get in Wisconsin a minimum of an additional $163 a week. And if for whatever reason you meet the maximum benefit, you get an extra $370 a week. So in that case, in Wisconsin, you'd be making almost a $50,000, it's like $45,000 a year salary equivalent if you get the full amount of the benefits. And they state that the benefit amount is 1% of 2019 income, subject to the PUA minimum and maximum. I suspect by benefit amount, tell me if you read this differently, Troy, they're referring to your weekly benefit amount. So basically, if you earned, 100,000 last year, no, that's a bad example. If you earned 30,000 last year, you'd be eligible for $300 a week under this law, on top of the $600 a week weekly benefit available under the FPUC program through the end of June. So that's the most of it. One thing that does get confusing here is they say the duration of the PUA benefits up to 39 weeks is that it's retroactive to the week ending February 8th, 2020, or the first week you were out of work due to COVID. So you're going to have to answer when this COVID crisis made you eligible, which we can try to talk more about. The last week it's payable is December 26, 2020. I think most people read that and they think they're eligible for the full $600 a week through the end of December, or through December 26th. But as I've read the law, and again, I'm not an expert, so don't quote me on this, but as I'm reading it, what it's saying is you're eligible for unemployment, but the federal pandemic unemployment compensation, that extra $600 a week, that only extends through the end of June. So you're eligible for the extra $600 a week, but it's only going to be through the end of June. After that, you'll be eligible, but under the traditional weekly benefit as the states have been funding it historically. Wisconsin's going to start taking these applications the week of the 21st, and information on how to apply will be available when it's available. So basically, they'll tell you more about it once they figure the rules out, but assume they're writing the rules as we speak, and that's why it's harder to answer some of your questions. I just want to stress all that is affecting that amount between 160 and 370. It's not affecting that $600 amount, and it's going to be backdated to when it is that you're able to demonstrate you were eligible. How you demonstrate when you're eligible, I think, is the type of question they're trying to figure out how to answer right now. So if you're hearing this and you're thinking, well, I still have questions based on what you're saying, a lot of it's because they do too, and they're trying to figure out which random answer they're going to give you. And once we have that, we'll be able to answer some more of your questions. Now I'm getting to the dry part of the presentation. So to the extent none of the rest of that was dry, this is even drier. The Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, or the FPCU, you'll hear that branded a lot. Don't expect to memorize this. I'm conveying it so you've heard it. You know that the information is there. So if you have questions about this later, you'll know where to go to look. And to the extent you can remember it, you're good at pop quizzes. It's an emergency program established by the CARES Act to increase unemployment benefits for Americans out of work. And this is the part that creates the extra $600 a week. Notably, this program didn't, in and of itself, as a program, extend eligibility. They left that for the PUA, that bottom one, which expands unemployment to self-employed workers, freelancers. There is an additional catch-all that may affect some people on this call called the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation. That program extended benefits for 13 weeks if you were already no longer eligible. So it's a way that if you've already been involved with unemployment and you've exhausted your benefits, you should look into that PEUC program, because under that program, you're eligible for essentially a fresh 13 weeks. So if anyone has gone through the unemployment process, you thought you were exhausted and that there was no reason for you to engage, there's good news. Because of the PEUC, you now actually have an additional 13 weeks. If you know someone who's been through unemployment and they aren't, living by the day-to-day of Department of Labor guidance, please make sure they know about that. It's someone who they're probably fiscally pretty hard up and they need money. And if you told them, it might make a world of difference for them. That FPUC program, the one that gives a $600 amount, it's a flat amount given to people receiving unemployment. It includes that $600 a week up to 4 months, in addition to the traditional benefits. And notably, just to reiterate, it also applies to people in that Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, that extra 13-week program, as well as critically what affects the most people on this call, self-employed independent contractors under that PEUC program. The good news is this part is pretty easy to administer. Once you're eligible for unemployment, they're just going to throw an extra $600 a week on. It just automatically comes through. So if you've already applied to receive UI benefits, you don't need to do anything in order to achieve the additional $600. The first payable week is retroactive on the $600 to the week ending April 4th. So it's possible you may get additional weeks under the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Act at the traditional state rate, and you may get retroactive to April 4th. You might get that additional FPUC. So the first check might be a little bit bigger because they might backdate it. At least under the purposes of the $600, they might give you an extra 2 weeks. The Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, this is the key program that we've been spending most of our discussion about. It's the one that provides temporary unemployment benefits to people who don't typically qualify, including people who've exhausted their unemployment compensation. You should file for PUA if you're ineligible for regular UC because you've lost income due to this crisis, and you're self-employed, or you're seeking part-time work, you don't have sufficient work history, you've exhausted all their options. Notably, if you're able to telework the same number of hours, you're not eligible. If you're receiving sick benefits or sick pay as a part of this crisis, you're not. If you quit your job because of COVID concerns, you may be eligible, but just know they've got guardrails around if you're quitting your job in order to become eligible for unemployment. You could find that gets you the different outcome than you're expecting. So they want people to keep working. They don't want people to quit just to take unemployment. So they'll have a guardrail to make sure that you really do meet the law's eligibility requirements. I've talked to a lot of people who thought, well, I'll just quit and start collecting unemployment, but it doesn't work like that. So notably, if you're thinking about that, you're going to want to read the law real long and hard to make sure that you don't make a jump and there's no safety net. So I think that's one that people think about a lot. The law has eligibility requirements. I'll try to pull them up when this is done, but make sure you comply with that. And if you're wrong, you could be both jobless and out of unemployment. So I would take the eligibility rules very seriously, and I would not cavalierly consider quitting a job in order to become eligible for unemployment without first making sure that you're eligible and you meet the law's requirements. For the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, this has a longer window. So it's eligible from January 27th of this year through the end of the year. It's up to 39 weeks. Again, it's the state's maximum benefit rate. Plus, you'll get that additional $600 a week as long as that part of the law is in effect, which is through June. You can be considered self-employed if your primary reliance for income is on the performance of services in your own business or on your own farm. So this includes gig workers, independent contractors, musicians. If you're working for yourself and your work for yourself creates your income, that's what makes you eligible for this law. And again, if you don't have a large work history, which is code for it, you haven't been making a lot of income, it doesn't mean that you're not eligible for the law. It might affect your eligibility for amount, but again, because so much of the law is a fixed benefit, it's more good news than not. And then finally, the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, which provides an additional 13 weeks of payments who've exhausted their UI benefits. It doesn't apply to people already to individuals receiving this PUA. So it's not like you can add 13 weeks onto 39. It's going to be the same as the regular UI benefit. It's retroactive a little bit. If you apply for UI, the state will figure out if you meet the requirements or not. So there's not like a separate application for this process. So that's the sources we had. I hope people found this valuable. Hope to answer some questions if anybody has them. If not, feel free to work with us. We're not unemployment experts on our team, but we just haven't seen anyone, I think, frame this as a musician's first program. And we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to make this program available to people. Brian, I think there may be some additional questions.
There are. The first is, if I'm employed at a regular job but working less than 40 hours a week, should I still apply now? My job will end at the end of the month of May. Should I still file for unemployment as a musician ASAP, or wait until my regular job ends in May?
Yeah, that's a pretty specific question, and I don't. I'm shying away from giving advice about people who are currently employed and how they can interact with this, because so much of the context is about the specifics of your job and the effect of all of this on your specific work hours. I will say we're trying to find a clinic, an unemployment clinic, to work with people on an individual basis. So it's a little bit more granular than we can answer on this call. I think that it's not unfair to figure out if you apply for this law. In other words, as I hear that question, I don't know that you would or wouldn't qualify, but I don't think it's reasonable to think that you might. So we'll try to follow up with more information after. But and Troy, unless you have anything additional, I don't know enough on that to give specific.
Yeah, I don't either. What's interesting is there might be a situation where if you're nervous about keeping your current job, or you're better off opting for unemployment entirely. But we would need to research that a little bit more.
Great. And so this one is really similar. I still work a full-time job that is still going. Will applying for unemployment for my loss as an artist get me in trouble with my day job income?
Yeah, again, it's the same type of dynamic. If there's fully employed, and what effect it has, that if you're essentially working, I don't want to say moonlighting as a musician, but if you're working two jobs and you're over 100%, I haven't seen specific guidance. I've seen underemployed. I haven't seen, down from 120 to 100% FTE. I haven't seen anything above that threshold, and we'll try to get specific information about that context. Everything I've seen has been if you're kind of underemployed or your time has been diminished, which there are eligibilities for. But I think I'm speculating for purposes of law. I think if you're fully employed, I don't think that they count a second job under the law in the current guidance, but it doesn't mean you wouldn't be eligible. So we'll try to, again, in both those questions, we'll try to follow up to find out what effect diminished income as a result of music work has when you're otherwise technically fully employed. It's a unique context because it's, again, sort of a job and a half. And we'll try to get you an answer on that. A lot of this is because they haven't released the specific guidance yet. So I don't know if the states have an answer for that. We might have to await specific information as the states are revealing it.
Great. Similar question here. Do I still get FPUC even if I've been denied unemployment benefits? And how do I apply for these things if I've already applied for unemployment and been denied?
The process, that's a good question. If you've already been applied and been denied, the state will likely create a mechanism when the new window opens that either ensures they will contact you because they believe you're eligible as self-employed. I don't have a high degree of faith in that, but that's what, according to that Minnesota tweet, that's what they say they're going to do. I believe that there will be a new application window that you can apply for. But they haven't stated that's true, so I'm speculating. But when that new application window opens, we will, through the backline programs, we'll try to do our best to send an email to everyone notifying them of that. And I'm hopeful, but I'm speculating about things we don't control. I'm hopeful that will be designed to accommodate you even if you've applied and been denied. I don't know, Troy, if you have a different take.
No, not really.
Cool. Last one for now, unless anything else comes through, says, I moved at the end of 2019. Should I apply for unemployment in the state where I currently live, which is Tennessee, or the state that I made the most income in 2019, which is Wisconsin?
That's again a specific one. My initial reaction is you'll be applying in Tennessee because you're currently residing there, and you would be they'd be distributing the checks. I think it's easier for them to just think if you're domiciled here, we'll be paying you here. But we would need to confirm that on this. I would go to the Tennessee department. I would go to the Tennessee unemployment. I Google Tennessee unemployment, and I would check the eligibility rules to apply there. I suspect it's if you are residing there.
Got it. That appears to be the last for now. So thank you, Joe. Thank you, Troy, for joining us. Super helpful. And again, to reiterate everything they've said, this is probably the single most beneficial thing to apply for artists and musicians right now.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And again, if between this, my hope is for artists who apply for this and become eligible for the $2,400 a week to $3,000 benefit, on top of if you with the stimulus check, which could be an additional $1,200 check on top of if you applied for the disaster loan. You could be looking at the ability to in the next 90 days, to be a $15,000 to $20,000 difference potentially, at least a $10,000 to $15,000 difference. So please take this seriously and do what you can to advocate for yourself to get the most help in the shortest time. And thank you to Meg and Sway and Brian for making this possible and inviting us to come in and present.
Thanks for joining us, Joe.
Yeah, pleasure. All right, thanks, everybody.